What would you do if during my talk or one of the other talks today, the speaker collapsed to the ground and stopped breathing? Would you have the courage to act? My name's Silas. I'm a paramedic working locally in the NHS, and I have professional interests in critical care and in the treatment of cardiac arrest. Cardiac arrest, for those that don't know, is defined as the cessation of normal heart function, such that blood is no longer pumped around the body and ultimately leading to death if not treated quickly. Upbeat, I know, but it gets better. In addition to my professional interests, I have vocational interests in communication and in the facilitation of learning. I guess what interests me is how a small idea, if shared appropriately, can go on to have huge positive impacts for the patients that we see in the ambulance service and in the wider community. But I'm not here today to tell you about my role as a paramedic. Instead, I'd like to share with you the story of my friend's dad, Steve. It's a story that still makes me emotional today, but by sharing it, I hope to give you the tools or to help you access the tools that you already have but maybe don't know about, to one day, maybe, save a life. Steve's one of those people you only meet a few times in life. He's a larger-than-life character whose caring and friendly personality immediately make you warm to him as a person. He's about 20 foot tall, with a thick moustache, tiny denim shorts most of the time, and a caring smile. He bellows when he talks, and he laughs at social conformity, choosing a hug over a handshake any day. Steve was a health trainer, and with a wealth of experience in mental health services, he was invited a few years ago to speak at a conference about his experience and share some learning with other healthcare workers in the community. So on the 5th of March 2014, after their morning coffee break, 70 conference delegates filed back into the room to find Steve standing in front of them, much like I am now, preparing to talk. He began his presentation, but a few minutes into it, he stopped speaking. His eyes glazed over, his face became pale, and he collapsed to the ground and stopped breathing. Well, that ain't normal, and it had never happened to Steve before, so what had caused this collapse? Well, Steve had an underlying cardiac condition or heart problem called CPVT. Essentially, that it meant that in certain situations and due to certain stresses, his heart was triggered to beat erratically, meaning it was unable to pump blood around his body. Steve was in cardiac arrest. I probably won't make any cardiologist friends by telling you this, but the heart really is a pretty simple bit of kit. It's an electrically powered mechanical pump, much like the boiler system in your house. Regular contractions pump blood around the body, delivering oxygen to the brain and vital organs and keeping us alive. Powering these contractions is a smooth wave of electrical activity that flows across the heart and triggers the muscle cells to contract, squeezing blood out. This heartbeat is what you can feel 60 to 80 times a minute when you take your own pulse. So what happened next? Well, the conference delegates acted quickly. One called 999. Within seconds, they were through to an emergency medical advisor who dispatched an ambulance and spoke them through exactly what to do next. A second person started doing chest compressions. This rhythmic squeezing of Steve's chest pumped blood around his body, buying time. A third person went and got an AED, an automated external defibrillator, and attached the sticky pads to his chest. If you haven't seen an AED before, this is what they look like. They can be found in most GP surgeries, airports, leisure centres and public places, and they really are easy to use. Anyone can open the cabinet, remove the AED and open the lids, and an automated voice will tell you exactly what to do. It will tell you to stick the pads to the patient's chest and then to step back while it analyzes the heart and prepares to shock it back into a normal rhythm. So effective was this treatment that by the time the ambulance arrived, Steve's heart was beating for itself again. The bystanders no longer had to do chest compressions because Steve was breathing normally and starting to wake up. The ambulance crew assessed him, they gave him some medication to relax him, and they took him into hospital for some investigations as to what caused his cardiac arrest. I'm sure most of you have seen the programs or documentaries, but in the ambulance service, when we take a high priority patient into hospital, we call ahead to let them know we're coming. A red phone situated in the middle of the department rings loudly, turning people's heads. I was actually a student paramedic at the time and on an educational placement in the hospital when that call came in. The nurse told us it was a cardiac arrest, so we gathered around the hospital bed, a couple of doctors and some nurses and myself, waiting for the patient to arrive. When the doors opened, what we expected to see was a patient unconscious on a stretcher, with a breathing tube in his mouth being rushed in for ongoing treatment. Instead, almost anticlimactically, we were met by Steve, who was sitting upright, looking around him, a little bit confused, but generally pretty happy. He was so well, in fact, that when we went to move him from the ambulance stretcher to the hospital bed, he looked around and said to us, in true Steve fashion, "Could I be of help in any way?" Steve underwent some tests in A&E, and then he was moved to a ward where he was fitted with a pacemaker-like device, which would automatically shock his heart should anything like that happen again. Ultimately, a few days after arriving at hospital, Steve walked out of it. A husband, a father to my two friends, walked out of hospital and back to his family 100% healthy because of what the bystanders did for him on that day. It's an amazing story, I'm sure you'll agree, but let me take you back to that conference and offer you a different set of events. What if the bystanders hadn't have done what they had done? What if they were too scared of hurting him or of getting it wrong, and instead chose to wait for the ambulance to arrive because, well, the ambulance crew are trained to deal with those kind of situations? Well, the longer someone's in cardiac arrest, the lower their chance of survival. And the data actually shows that for every minute that someone's in untreated cardiac arrest, their chance of survival decreases by about 10%. National data from last year found that the average ambulance response to a C1 call, that is a cardiac arrest call, across the UK was 7 minutes. If you factor in the time it takes for the crew to arrive, to park the ambulance, to get out of the cab, to get their stuff from the back, to enter the property, find the patient and start treating them, you're looking at least 8 or 9 minutes, by which time the patient's chance of survival is pretty much zero. In the UK, only about 32% of people intervene in sudden cardiac arrest. That means that for every 3 people in this room, only one of us would have the courage to do something if they witnessed a collapse like that. That is so frustrating to me for 2 reasons. One is that, well, clearly I'm interested in cardiac arrest management, and as a paramedic I'm trained to deal with it. But ironically, because of the job that I'm in, I'll never be in a situation to do the most for these patients. The second is that treating these patients is so simple. I appreciate it might not be easy. Often it's a loved one or a friend, and you don't want to hurt them or get it wrong. But it really is simple. I mentioned that the heart is like a boiler system, and I think we can all relate to a situation in which the boiler breaks down. And initially, it's not too much of an issue, but as the days go on, it becomes more and more of a frustration. And so we arrange for a boiler repair person to come out and to fix it. And they do. And they look at the electrical system for about 10 or 15 seconds before pressing a button, and everything's working again. And you're standing there thinking, I just waited days and spent who knows how much money for them to come out and do something I probably could have done myself. It is the same situation for sudden cardiac arrest. But how simple is it really? I said I wanted to give you some tools to help save a life, and there really is only 3. If you witness someone collapse, the first thing to do is to call 999. Within seconds, you'll be through to an emergency medical advisor who will dispatch an ambulance and will tell you exactly what to do next. The second thing to do is to start chest compressions. Don't worry if you're not sure, because if they're in cardiac arrest, you will help to save their life. If they're not, they'll probably wake up and tell you to get off them pretty quick. 3, get an AED. They really are simple to use. You don't need any training. And the earlier they're used, the higher the patient's chance of survival. AEDs save lives. You don't need any training to do any of this, but if it interests you, I'd really encourage you to access one of the great free courses provided by St John's Ambulance or by the British Heart Foundation or other organisations, and really learn these life-saving skills. These steps are so important because behind each statistic and behind each number is a person. A husband, a father, a mother, a parent or a friend. Not every sudden cardiac arrest is survivable, but for the ones that are, bystander intervention is the most important factor. And as evidence of this, here's Steve and his awesome family, only a few months ago this year. Unfortunately, he's not wearing his denim shorts. So I'd like to close by asking you again, and I hope I know the answer, and if the answer before was no, I hope it's now changed to yes. But if you witness someone collapse today, would you have the courage to act? And would you have the courage to save their life? Thank you.